Hey, I'm having some trouble with the sound. Can you hear me, Ashley? Preston? You can? Okay, never mind, Michelle. Thank you. Good. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Hey, everybody. Hey, everyone. Ashley, I saw you. Okay. All right, Preston. Okay, more folks are coming in. Good to see everyone. I want to make sure I can share. I'm going to test share while we're waiting for everyone to come in. Give me 1 minute here. Met all. Hey Siri, call Michelle Petway. Hey everyone, thanks. Giving people a few more minutes to join. I think we should have 20 something folks, and um, I am just trying to enable my screen sharing. So we'll wait a few minutes here. Yep. Bye. Okay, good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me? Somebody gives me the, okay, great. Thanks so much for your patience, everyone. Hopefully, I see 13 people are in here. We were expecting, I think, over 20, but things change. And I appreciate your patience. There's a couple of me in here, which is sort of embarrassing. I am up in Vancouver Island right now. My 99-year-old mother fell a week ago today and fractured her femur. And so my husband and I drove 34 hours straight, except for 90 minutes, and we're out here. And my Bethel computer crashed. And so this is a brand new computer. And that's why I'm having trouble. This is the first time I've Zoomed on it. So thank you so much. What I would like to do is just take a few minutes and just hear briefly, just do some intros. And then we're going to get to it. We have a lot to do today. And I think this exam prep is a little bit more important because it talks about really important strategies. We're going to do some questions, some practice questions in the second half, and then I'm gonna give you a couple of exam preps that you can take on your own just to see how you do, and you'll get the results at the end. I have a QR code for you. But mostly what's important and the longest part of this is just some really important considerations and things to tend to while you're taking the exam. So we're going to get started. But first, I just want to hear quickly who you are, when you plan to take your exam, and what you hope to do after. So just real briefly though, like 30 seconds is kind of your maximum. So Alexa, hi, nice to see you. Alexis, nice to see you on the top. Sorry. I was trying to get my mom's Alexa set up this afternoon. So, and amazing. I just have to say, it's amazing what they can do in surgery. She fractured her femur in half. She is not wearing a cast. They put a giant rod in her leg, and she's up and walking already. So it is miraculous. So Alexis, go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
hear from you.
Alexis. I think I'm planning on taking the exam sometime in like July, sometime in the summer. After graduation, I got one of the grants for like to work in a school after, so I have to find a school setting to work in after. So that's what I'll be looking for.
Excellent. Good to see you, Alexis. Christy, or we'll hop. She may be a step. Oh, there she is. Hi, Christy.
Hi. I too plan to take the exam around July. And I'm still up in the air of where I want to work. I think more with women or geriatric people.
Okay. Awesome. Nice to see you, Christy. Emma Dalton.
Yeah, I'm Emma. I am taking the exam on June 3rd, and I will be working at Fraser starting June 15th, pending I pass the exam.
Congrats. That's awesome. Anushka.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anushka. I am hoping to take the exam in June. I have been in class with many of you. I'm at the American Parkinson Disease Association right now. I plan on continuing my work there and maybe transitioning at some point in the future to working with people with developmental disabilities. So, Christy, if you have any questions about geriatric work, please feel free to reach out. My first degree was in gerontology. Thank you, everyone.
Hey. Sorry, I think it was my connection. So I've had to descend into the abyss of my son's broom because I think it's closer to the thing. So sorry. Did you all hear Anushka's introduction? Okay, my apologies. Okay, Rachel.
Yeah, I am Rachel Golke. Like Anushka said, I've been in class with a lot of you, so it's exciting to see everybody again. I am taking my exam on June 9th, and then during the month of May, I'm just gonna plant a bunch of seeds and throw my application out there. I've did two totally different practicums, one in a school setting and then one in hospice. So I would love to do either of those things. So I'm just going to throw stuff out there and interview and see what feels like it is a good fit.
There's always spaces for social workers, so that's always good news for us. Nathan.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm taking the exam May 1st, and I'm planning to stay in my school social worker role after that.
Awesome. That's coming up.
Mhm.
Rachel Lane.
Yeah, I plan to take the test on July 7th, and I plan to also work in a school, so just sending out all the applications these days.
Excellent. Kaylin.
I'm planning to take my LSW in May, and then next year, May, take my LGSW, and I have my current placement for next year at Children's Hospital in the ED. So that's really exciting. So I hope to continue to work in a hospital.
Excellent. Grace.
Hi, yeah, my name is Grace. I'm planning on taking the exam on the same day as you, Emma, on June 3rd. And so then I plan on being in a school setting after that.
Okay. And Ashley.
I just confirmed with the state that even though I didn't get a confirmation, I am clear to schedule the test. I had to call to make sure that was done. So I'll be scheduling it tonight, probably as soon as possible. And then I love working with people who are neurodivergent, people with disabilities. We deserve more advocacy. So there are a lot of places that I can do that. I'm looking at schools and hospitals. And then I do plan on pursuing like a small private practice just to get myself set up.
Excellent. Preston.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Preston. Just like Kaylin, I'm taking my LSW exam here. I'm taking it next Tuesday actually, so hoping for any kind of like tips here today. And then for my future practice, I'm hoping to do like some kind of like on like in the field intervention work, like meeting people in their homes or meeting them out in the community, something like that. So yeah.
Excellent. Good to see you, Preston. Miranda.
Hey, I'm Miranda. I am the lucky one that gets to take a additional test before my licensure test because I got my undergrad so long ago. So I'm taking that test this month, and then next month I'm hoping to take my licensure exam. And I currently work at a hospital, and I'm going to be leaving that role because I can't grow there. And I actually got offered a job at a outpatient clinic for youth, which is totally not in my wheelhouse. But that was offered to me starting July. But I also have some other interviews lined up more in grief and loss because that is my specialty. So I don't know where I'll end up. I'm open.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And it's a constant reminder of like just the many, many things that we can do as social workers, and it's pretty amazing. So, so here's what we're going to do tonight. We have I think, a long time booked for this. I'm not sure how long it's going to take us to get through everything. I'm going to go through the first part that's a little shorter, just kind of talking a little bit about licensure in general. Then we're going to go into like tips and everything. I highly recommend that you take some notes down. I'm going to give you some additional resources. And then, like I said, I can't remember if it's 25 or 30 practice exam questions that we'll go through together. And then there's 2 exam tests that you can take that we've pulled together for you. So you can take those and see how you do. Just so you know, I went back to graduate school and got my MSW after I already kind of had been doing other work. And when I first worked in a state where they didn't require licensure has come a long way. And then when I moved to Minnesota, I got a job at Ramsey County, and the counties are exempt. You can be a social worker there and not have a license, which is a little bit strange. And I worked at a county. So it wasn't until I came to Bethel 11 years ago that I had to write my license. And thankfully I had all my clinical hours and my supervision and everything. And so it feels like not so long ago, it does sound kind of long, that I prepared for my LICSW to take that. And so I find that what I'm presenting to you today were the things that were super helpful to me and to others. I took an exam prep course, and I'm hoping that these things are helpful for you. And I think they are really important. They are very detailed, and kind of not the most exciting, but I think super helpful. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint presentation if I can. I think it's over here. Are you able to see the licensure prep now? Can someone I can only see my screen. So can someone please tell me if you can see it? If I've shared.
No, we can't see it.
Okay, give me a minute here. Now can you see it? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, now we can. Yep.
All right. So tonight, overview of licensure. We'll go through that really quick. Take a quick break, get a drink, stretch for the long part, preparing for the test, tips, etc. And then the practice questions, and then the practice test questions for you that you can scan and do once we're done. As most of you probably know, this exam prep session tonight is really for BSW and MSW people taking their exams. It's not a clinical. There's a lot of generalist information, and tonight it's not necessarily about content because that's what you've learned. It's about test taking. So again, with the BSW, we're eligible for LSW. In order to have an LGSW, you have to have an MSW degree, which most of you will have by the end of May. And the other of you who are undergraduate, most of you will have that by next year, which will go really quickly. You are never obligated to move forward to get the LISW, the LICSW. You can stay at an LGSW, but there are two other levels of exam in Minnesota, the LISW and the LICSW. The LIC is the clinical exam, which is the highest level of licensure and allows you to do that clinical work independently and have independent practice. And so what you are all here for today is preparing for either your LSW or your LGSW. And okay. In Minnesota, just so you know, the Minnesota Board of Social Work requires that you have 100 all of these 6 areas, 360 clinical clock hours in the following areas: differential diagnosis, clinical treatment planning, clinical intervention methods, evaluation methodology, social work values, ethics, cultural context, diversity and social policy, and culturally specific assessment. When it comes time for you to get your LICSW, which most people do go for, you will get a form that comes from the board and you send it back to us at Bethel and we fill it out because you have all of these clock hours are in our curriculum. And so we fill out a form and I sign it and you actually will submit it to the board. So this is a real far look ahead thing, but just know when in 2 years, which was the soonest you would be able to get your clinical, in 2 years, once you get to that point of or beyond, you just reach back out to us and we'll fill that form out for you and sign it so that you have it to submit it. Why won't it advance? Okay. Here are a couple of websites that I think are really helpful to you. This one is called How I Passed the Licensing Exam. A lot of the tips I will go over with you tonight, but these are just some resources that during the break I'll chat them in the link to you. So How I Passed the Licensing Exam, 10 tips, studying tips for the social work licensure exam, which again comes from the social work license mapping document, and this is helpful as well. There's information about pocket prep, and then a whole bunch of other information here that is helpful for you to use depending on how much time. If you're like Preston and you're taking it in this month, you might not have time to go through all these, but I'm going to send all of these resources so that you have them and you can access them at your convenience. There are also some apps that you can find on your phone. Some of them are free, some of them aren't. But those are called Quizlet. I checked that today. That is available. It's by discipline, so you'll have to go in further and find the social work one. Then there's the LCSW one, LCSW Genius. There's an MSW one. There's one called CRAM. And then you can see here that ASWB, that's the Association of Social Work Boards. They also offer an examination candidate handbook, and so that's there. So I'm going to make sure to send all of these things to you so that you have them and you can access them as you sort of map out your study. So I'm probably not going to do a break right now. I'm going to start on some of the tips on taking the exam, and then probably, let's see, it's 3:52, 5:52 there. Maybe at about 6:30 or maybe 6:30, we'll try to take a break and a stretch and get a drink or whatever, and then keep going. So we're going to launch right away into tips on taking the exam. So one of the things, and if I can't see you right now, I can only see my screen. So if you have a question, just be like, Eydie, I have a question. Can you pause for a minute? And I will answer your question. There are 3 types of questions on the exams, and know that the ASWB exam is the exam all across the United States. So I think typically, and I'm not sure if I put this in here, it's not this, there's probably 6 or 8 exams that are in circulation. But everyone takes an ASWB exam. And the 3 types of questions are recall, things you have to remember, application, how do you apply the things that you've learned in the program, and then reasoning, how do you use critical thinking, uh, cognitive and effective processes to arrive at the right conclusion. While each exam contains a mix of these types of question, the composition varies depending upon the category. And like I said, there are a number of different exams out, so that, people, you might go to a different testing center, or the same testing center, and you might have like different questions than someone who's sitting beside you, but it's still the LSW or the LGSW exam. For those of you taking the bachelor's exam, they have more recall and application questions. And for those that are taking clinical or advanced generalist, you'll have more application and reasoning questions versus the recall. The master's test, so for LGSW, they'll probably have an equal distribution of all 3 question types. But for those of you taking the LSW, more recall and less reasoning. All the ASWB exams have the same format. There are going to be 170 multiple choice questions. You're going to have 4 hours from the time that the first question is seen to take the exam. It's computerized, but requires no specialized computer knowledge. If you know how to operate a computer, you'll be fine. And they actually do give you a little computer tutorial that assists with orientation to the software. So in case you have any questions, but I can't imagine that would be problematic for anyone. Spending time getting comfortable with the device is a good idea, since it does not count toward the time limit. So once you sit down, make sure that you're comfortable, you know where everything is, have a look around, and make sure you know where you are and how you're doing it and what you need to do before you start the exam, what the policies are. I'll talk a little bit about breaks and all that in a little bit. There is a brief restroom break that's allowed, but the clock doesn't stop. And so you have to remember, if you need to go to the bathroom, that you'll have to check out and they'll help you, tell you where it is and what the policy is. But the clock doesn't stop on your exam. So it's important to be judicious if you're taking any time for breaks. There are 170 questions, but only 150 of those questions that you answer are used to determine whether a passing score is achieved. So you're not going to know which ones are the ones that are being counted. 20 of the questions in the 170 are piloted. And so they're just including them in there to see if they're good questions. And so you can't be like, oh, I don't want to answer those questions, or you're not going to know which ones they are. So please answer all 170 of the questions. I just talked about that. No question should be left blank. If you don't know, obviously, take a guess. But we're going to talk a little bit tonight about how to sort of eliminate the guesswork. So it's really important that you answer all 170 questions. ASWB contracts with a vendor to proctor through the examinations. And so when you go into the exam room, you could be sitting beside a pharmacist, or somebody getting their truck driving license, or somebody getting a license to do like a beautician. I'm not sure if that's what they're called, an esthetician. or nursing or pharma, like all different kinds of people in there. It's not just social workers in there. And so you will have no idea who you are sitting beside. So one of the reasons I talk about that is because if you don't know that and you're like, whoa, that person just started and it's an hour and they're done, that could cause a little anxiety. So just know that people are taking, there might not be any other social workers in there. And all the exam times are different. So just take your time, use your 4 hours, and I'll talk to you a little bit, just kind of how I used mine. It's possible to take the examination in any state or jurisdiction, even if it's not the one in which you're seeking licensure. So, a couple years ago, actually, one of our really super strong students, I think, failed the exam by 1 or 2 points. And kind of like a few people have indicated here, like you kind of need it to start your job. And because I think you have to wait 3 months, I believe, before you can reschedule in the state of Minnesota, she scheduled an exam down in Iowa and drove down to Iowa, I think, the next week and passed the exam. So just know that because it's a national exam, you can take it anywhere. In addition, social worker does not need to live in the jurisdiction to be licensed there. Social workers can hold licenses in multiple states, jurisdictions they often do that, and that may be required if you're going to do telehealth or providing services to clients who live in other states' jurisdictions that are different from where you live. So I've seen that in Wisconsin where people have to have licenses in both because they're working and providing services across the river. So your employer will know that and can talk to you about that. Also, the license that you get there are different things, but you can, Canada, you can use your social work license up here too. So licensure examinations are administered anytime the testing centers are open, but appointments are needed. You can't just walk in. Select a time when your personal performance is at its peak. So if you don't do well in the morning, don't take your license exam at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you're a morning person, do that. If you're an afternoon person, try to schedule a time where you know you function best. If you like to take a nap after lunch, don't schedule that. It is lengthy, so avoid taking it in the afternoon. Okay, I just said that. There are rules about scheduling and canceling appointments which need to be closely followed, and this information is available on the ASWB's website. Testing center activities are closely monitored, and all belongings, including watches and phones, have to be locked in free lockers that are provided. So you'll hand them your phone. Last time they actually had me take off a necklace that I was wearing because it had a little bit of a big like thing on it, and I guess they thought maybe I wrote notes on there or something, but they take everything, and I think you can't even bring in water. I'm not sure. I think they have water there. So it's very closely monitored. There is an ability to ask for earplugs, scrap paper, or a pencil, but food, drinks, and other belongings are not allowed in the room. In fact, the day I took my exam, there was a blizzard outside, and the exam center was still open, and I had kind of gotten my feet wet with snow on the way in. I had boots on, and I tried to take them off, and they wouldn't let me take my boots off. So, yeah. The room may be hot or cold, so dress comfortable and in layers so that you can not have to deal with being freezing or hot. And so just like these are super easy, but important things. If you need accommodations for the licensure tests, those have to be approved in advance. All testing accommodations related to documented disabilities must be approved by the licensing board and arranged in advance. Extra time is the most common accommodation that's granted. Some states allow for accommodations for those for whom English is not a first language, and others do not. So that's, that being able to take it in other states could be important for people for whom English is not their first language. But when registering for the exam, there is a form that must be completed with appropriate supporting documentation, and they usually grant requests as appropriate. It's important that accommodations be approved prior to arriving at the testing center, as there are strict rules which must be followed by site personnel who do not have the authority to change them without approved accommodations. Examinations are scored immediately and unofficial results are provided. So you're going to know right away if you pass the exam or not. I will tell you that this was like one of the like real crazy things for me is that like you write the exam and you go, okay, I'm done, and you press enter because you're completed, and then you think like it's such a nerve-wracking thing, right, to press that like button, and then it says, are you sure you're done? And then you go, oh my gosh, yes, I'm sure. So then you work up the nerve to press the button again, and they might even do it a third time, but then it routes you to a survey. You're like, oh my gosh, they kind of want questions about, what you think about the exam and what your experience is like. And it's like, as we know, if I were writing a research study, I would say that's a horrible time to do a survey to ask what it's about, because all you care about is your score. So eventually then they say, congratulations, you have passed. And then if you're me, you cry a little bit because you're so relieved. And then they'll give you a little paper when you leave, but it's not your formal results. So when passing, which I'm sure you will all do, a one-page report is provided with your name, the test category. So if it's a BSW, an MSW, or whatever, your test date, your state, and the number of questions correct that you needed to pass. I should actually look right here in case anyone's trying to join. Let me pause here for a minute. No, we're good. Okay. Okay, can you see the screen again? Okay, great. Thanks. So just remember that the results are unofficial and they still need to be securely transmitted electronically to the licensing board. I think I said a picture is also taken at the testing center included on the passing report. And the results are not going to change, but they have to be transmitted securely in order to be official. Oops, I got to play the slideshow again. Okay. What if you don't pass? If not passing again, you'll get a one-page summary that's provided to you. It'll list the 4 content areas and the number of questions asked in each of the 4 domains. It also lists the number of questions answered correctly in each of these areas. However, you don't ever get to find out which questions you missed. It's a pass-fail, and passing score can be used for certification or licensure in any state. If there are questions about the process for sending passing exam scores to other states or jurisdictions for licensure, then you need to ask ASWB. We don't know about that, but if you're taking your exam here and you need it to be sent to a different area, you need to contact ASWB for that. Okay, it is 4:04 here, so 6:04 there. So we're going to do a little bit of tips for answering questions correctly. Here's where we get into the things that I think really are important for when you get to actually taking the exam, and that I believe can really, if you follow like these tips and really stop to sort of internalize this and write them down, and as you're taking practice tests, apply these, I think it's going to make a huge difference. So first, it's super essential that the questions are thoroughly understood before looking at the answers. The most difficult part of selecting the correct answer is identifying the knowledge area that is being tested. How? How do we do that? 1, read the question exactly as it is written. Pay attention to keywords and those in the quotes. Do not look at the response choices yet. Read the question. Understand the question, because sometimes I think the data shows that like people will read the question once kind of quickly. Remember, you're anxious. This is the big stakes here, right? And so you read it and then you just jump down and you start trying to decide which is the right answer without fully understanding the question. So then I would ask myself, okay, what is this question about, to determine which area is being tested? Think about the important concepts. Those are essential in distinguishing the correct answers from the incorrect answers, because unfortunately, sometimes there are multiple correct answers, but the question is going to tell you which is I should say there are multiple possibilities that could be correct, but the question and going back to the question is going to really help you discern what they're looking for, and then you can discern the correct answer. Examine the question again to confirm that any assumption about what is being tested is correct. And I'm going to kind of talk about that later. And there are a lot of keywords and different things that you can look at, but I will really want to encourage you to examine the question. Pause, don't look at the answers, slow your mind, take a deep breath, and go, what are they getting at here? Because that can switch when you do that. My brain works super fast. And sometimes like I just make assumptions about the question because I read it too fast and then get to the answer and choose the one that could be okay, but it's really not what they're asking. So that's really, really important. Then, after you really understand the question, look at the response choices for the first time. Eliminate any that do not appear to be correct. If more than one response choice appears to be available, go back and read the question again, looking at only the remaining answers. So that relationship, that symbiotic relationship between question and answer is really often overlooked, and I really want to encourage you about that. Let's talk a little bit about eliminating answers. It's difficult to eliminate 3 of 4 possible answers immediately. So this process of eliminating things may involve multiple iterations. Each time you eliminate a response, read the question and the answers that are left. It sounds like a little bit like draining to do that, but again, you're going to get better results if you do this on the exam. And remember, like, you carry a lot of nerves into this. So going back to the question each time that an answer is eliminated helps with keep focusing on critical content, which is contained in the question. So again, this may seem like common sense, but a lot of times we don't do this when we're like hopping into things and we have developed test taking skills in a very like, sort of fast moving environment and we're doing things quickly. Slow down. You have 4 hours and I encourage you to take all 4 hours. I did that. I finished after about maybe a little bit less than 2 hours. And I went that some people don't suggest doing this, but I went through everything again because I wanted to be sure and I knew I had the time and I felt more calm. And I felt like I was a little bit more in the mindset of test taking. So I was like, I wanted to be done, but I'm like, no, I'm here and I'm just going to be meticulous about it. And that's what I did. So, often test takers spend more time reading and debating between the answers than critically analyzing the questions, which is a big mistake. So I know hopefully you're going to take this as one of the big takeaways tonight is how important the question is. Okay, we're going to talk. Are there any questions about that so far? All right, I'm going to talk now strategies for questions with proper names. So when answers are proper names, read and think about them before looking at the questions. While many questions have answers which are long, there are others that consist of proper names, such as those of clinical terms, diagnoses, theories, or medications. When asked to select between 4 listed items, diagnoses, theories, or medications, it is best to read the answers first and think about their usage, meaning, and/or applications before looking at the questions. So this is a little bit different, right? Because if you're reading the question first, then you're going to like maybe not have a chance to use the knowledge that you've had to think about, okay, what systems theories, what's strengths-based theory or diagnoses or medications. And for LSW, you're not going to have as many medications in there. But it really is best to look at those. Okay, I see a proper name. Let me go look at these things. What do I know about them? Now let's go back and examine the question. What did I just do? Okay. Don't leave questions blank. So, what the research says is that it's better to go through and answer all your questions, even if you don't know them. Don't skip around or leave answers blank. You're going to be able to flag questions and go back to them, but answer all your questions. Don't leave them blank because you might actually miss them going back. And even if you don't know, miss a chance just to, maybe accidentally get it right. There's plenty of time to answer the questions in the 4-hour period. Although the examination is timed, most people have no issue with test completion, but are very nervous about the time and feel rushed due to anxiety. Often that anxiety can fuel the desire to leave questions blank if answers are unknown or to skip around to find questions that are more familiar. Such an approach is a mistake. The questions should be answered in the order in which they are listed, and skipping around wastes time. Not answering a question after this analysis occurred serves no purpose because no more information will be available later in the examination. So work on it. We're going to talk about how you can flag those questions in a little bit. Apply the strategies we've talked about and the ones we will continue to talk about. Select an answer and move on. Okay, let's talk for a minute about flagging your questions. Lastly, the computer can be used to flag questions for which the correct answers are uncertain. So when I took my exam, I went through my clinical exam. I answered all the questions. I flagged the ones. You'll see it says flag this question that I was like, oh, I don't know about this. So after I finished going through them once, I went back to my flag questions, and then I spent more time and I felt better about them. Some of the ones that I was uncertain about, just through the process of going through everything, I was like, oh, now I know this. And then I answered it, what I thought seemed easier. And then I went through everything again. So flagging must be avoided and only used for a few questions throughout the examination. I probably flagged out of 170 questions, 25 questions, 30 questions, actually. So I think you should flag what you want to flag. It says this is from some of the stuff I read. There is really no reason to flag, as again, there will be more information to help with selecting correct answers. But even though I'm saying that this is sort of a best practice, I found flagging helpful. You know yourself, trust what you know, and I would say flag liberally if you want to. Flagging can cause increased and necessary anxiety for some people where they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to go back to these 40 questions or 25 questions. For me, it was super helpful because I knew exactly what I wanted to get back to. And so I just want to say, know yourself, know thyself. And if you think it's better for you to just go through everything and only flag one or two or none, then do that. But I just want you to know that you can flag questions. And for me, think about that in advance, like when you're taking practice exams, like, flag some things like either, and you won't be able to probably do it in the same way, but check them off and go back to them and, kind of figure out what is best for you. But it is an option. Even when passing, test takers do get a lot of questions incorrect. So if you're finding yourself like not really sure about quite a number of questions, that's okay because lots of people get answers incorrect and still pass. Okay, moving on. The best answer is not always the correct answer. Standardized examinations are often difficult, and test takers find themselves struggling to identify the correct answer from several listed. You will find this to be the case. Some are super obvious and seem very straightforward, and sometimes you're like, oh, like I'm not sure what the correct answer is here. And I'm gonna give you some really good pointers about that. In these instances, social workers can make a common mistake, such as selecting the answer that has catchy social work phrases, such as from the client's perspective or focus on a client's strengths and skills. So beware of catchy social work phrases. If answers are judged solely based on the inclusion of important social work terms, independent of what the question is really asking, it's really easy to be drawn to the best answers, judged slowly on the basis of inclusion of social work jargon, even if they are not correct. So sometimes there's a little bit of trickiness going in there. So just know that sometimes they use that social work jargon. And again, going back to the question, the root question is really important. And again, we're going to get to important words and important things to think of. One way to avoid making this mistake is to go back and reread the question when debating between answers. So we've talked about that before, the importance of going back, and I'll continue to emphasize that this evening. And oftentimes test takers struggle with choosing between answers without going back to the questions to reconfirm what is being tested. So that's a little bit from what I talked, different from what I talked about first. In the initial presentation, I'm saying it's really important to earlier on, I talked about the importance of understanding the question. Now I'm saying, and reading it and rereading it before you look at the answers. Now I'm saying, do that again. If you are having, struggling between two answers, continue to return to the questions. Simply debating between the answers without reviewing the questions again may lead to picking the best ones based on compelling social work terms or content rather than the connection to the question. So again, returning to that question. This is a standardized test, so do not fight it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means, and it's important to understand what that means. Questions are written to make sure that all social workers provide uniform responses. So what that means is if you have, say, been doing your practicum like in a place that's treating people with substance use disorder or in a hospital setting, and you happen to have a lot more knowledge about that particular area of practice in which you are more skilled, don't go down those rabbit holes of like, well, I know this, and so I'm picking this answer because I know it, because that's not generalist knowledge. Think about your competencies, our 9 competencies, whether or not they're the specialized or the generalist, like competencies that and base it on that. Don't go down rabbit holes of professional expertise. Answers cannot depend on individualized practice experiences or diverse agency protocols and policies. So, again, you might know a policy or a protocol at an agency that's different than what the exam is asking. That doesn't matter. You have to go back to think, what would a generalist social worker, either at the undergraduate or graduate level, how would we think about applying the competencies to arrive at the correct answer? This part is very important. Avoid inappropriately asking, what would I do in this instance? How should I handle this situation? As the questions lead to picking answers that draw upon your own individual practice experience, which varies across test takers, rather than the existing generalized knowledge that all social workers have. This is super important. Okay. Because as you know, like even in this group of folks here who are here tonight, you all are going to have specialized knowledge that's different based on where you've been. So always go back to that root of who we are and our 9 competencies and how we apply those in a generalist way. There's only one correct answer for each question. Since everyone has different practice experience, basing answers on what is seen and done in the field can lead to many different approaches, which does not work when taking standardized tests. However, the knowledge base of our profession as taught in all social work programs is universal, regardless of setting or practice experience. That's why I say I encourage you highly to look at the competencies and look at those even as you're studying. So, because I think that will help quite a bit. Basing responses on information that is taught in the classroom and outlined in social work textbooks ensures getting consistent answers with others, even if there are factors that make it impossible to implement them in certain work settings. All right. The importance of social justice and macro practice is paramount in our exams. As you know, and particularly in our program at Bethel, social workers are mandated to address the root causes of systemic issues rather than blaming those impacted by them. This will come up in the exam. All social workers, even those specializing in clinical or micro practice methods, have these responsibilities. Thus, scenarios on the examinations that appear to be testing direct practice with individuals can actually be situations in which social workers must change policies or advocate for clients' rights in order to address issues causing distress, such as discrimination and lack of adequate services. So again, you're going to kind of understand these more because you're going to see the questions and see that they're, it's a kind of a systems kind of a question. And so that's going to give you a clue to, okay, out of these 4 multiple choice answers, I'm going to maybe be making sure that I'm looking very closely at the policy related answers. All exams, including those in the clinical category, so when you get to that point, are going to include questions aimed at ensuring social workers are change agents and fight for social justice. We know the profession is rooted in serving those who are poor and disenfranchised. So it is essential as you're taking your exam to make sure the root causes of problems are addressed. And so sometimes that comes up as barriers to properly serving clients. And so you need to make sure that you're looking at the answers through the lens of what is best for the client. The self-determination of clients must only be limited in situations that could harm clients or others. The correct response choices are always the ones that put clients first. Okay. Questions about conflicts, adhering to policies, challenging injustice. This is stuff that, like, I can attest comes up on the exam. And so these are some really important tips that will help you arrive at the correct answer. Questions often focus on conflicts between meeting clients' needs versus adhering to practices or policies created by the agencies. When there is a barrier, when there's a question about a barrier to meeting the client's needs, you, as the respondent social worker, must take responsibility for trying to remove the barriers. Social workers must fight to change rules which do not maximize client functioning. So having clients comply is blaming the victim and not getting to the root cause of the issue. Answers which reflect these kinds of changes are correct, even when the changes seem unrealistic and lengthy. I think this is really important because you will find questions in the exam where it's like, do this policy advocacy kind of activity. And it's like, you seem like, oh my gosh, if I was actually going to do that, it would take me like a year to do that. So that can't be the right answer. But that is the answer that's correct, even if it's unrealistic and lengthy, because we always have to think about what do we do to avoid blaming victims for root cause issues that are centered in systemic injustice and bad policy. So just remember that even sometimes in those policy questions, if the answer is unrealistic and lengthy, that doesn't mean it's not right. In fact, it probably is right if it's a policy related thing. Whether or not the social worker, you, is successful does not change the mandate to challenge unjust practices. So kind of going back to that, if it's like do policy advocacy and all this, you're like, well, I'm seeing my client today. How am I going to do that? Just remember that you're going to have some questions like that on there. Answers shouldn't, this is a good way to think about it. Answers should not be dismissed just because they seem too difficult to achieve. And if test takers do not challenge injustice through policy practice on their examinations, somewhere it is likely that they have answered that question incorrectly. Okay, we're going to go get through, I think, this next question. It's 4:24. We're going to take a little break then. Don't get distracted by scenarios. It's another big point. Don't get distracted by scenarios. Although there are some questions that require a simple recall of content, many ask for the application of information to particular situations or scenarios. So these will come in the form of vignettes, and we'll see those in some of our practice questions in a little while. And those are often the ones in which social workers make mistakes. In practice, social workers often alter their actions based on many contextual variables. However, again, remember that the questions on the exam are about application of social work knowledge, and this knowledge does not change regardless of the setting in the vignette. So that's where, again, it's like, don't go down rabbit holes. Answer it as a generalist, like either the graduate generalist or the undergrad generalist. Like, don't go down the rabbit holes and like go, okay, well, in this sort of scenario here, this could have happened and this has been my experience. You'll end up choosing the wrong answer that looks like a pretty good alternative, but that's not what they want. They're testing your generalist standard knowledge. So don't get lost in the scenarios. It's essential to stay focused on the content being tested and remember that it's not necessary to have worked in any specific setting mentioned in the vignette, right? If they're talking about a hospital or in a school in order to answer pass the exam. Core social work content is what is being tested, and that's universal, regardless of the venue. And I think this is very important for you to remember. I titled this one, Seeing the Forest Through the Trees. Often there are one or two answers that we've already talked about this that might be helpful to clients in the specific circumstances described, but do not represent important social work concepts that can be applied universally to other situations or scenarios. So you're like, yeah, that looks good, but look at that too. Well, maybe that's not helpful and it wouldn't be helpful in other situations. And then that can help you discern what the correct answer is. Again, the exam does not aim to test what social workers do in every instance, but rather, or in every specific instance, but rather knowledge that might be applied or must be applied more broadly. So make sure you can see the forest through the trees by not narrowly focusing on the specific client situation and missing the important broader intent of the question. Note, most questions on the ASWB exams are not focused on psychopathology, but instead test the broad and diverse knowledge used by those in the profession. There are many appropriate interventions to address client problems, not just counseling, so it's important not to solely focus on the treatment of client emotions as the goal of services. I don't know why I put this stuff on this slide. Sorry, I must have meant to put it elsewhere. The ASPW exams that are used in every U.S. state, as well as the District of Columbia, U.S. Virgin Islands, and several Canadian provinces. Correct answers are the same for all social workers taking the exams, regardless of where you live. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and come back to where... Okay, where did my stop sharing button go? That's weird. All right, we are going to take a, it's 6:28 there. Let's come back at 6:35 and we'll keep pressing on to get through this. There's a lot more like helpful. I know it's not rocket science, but let's do that. And then we'll get to the exam question. So we'll see you in about 7 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Hey, everybody, welcome back. So I kind of want to just pause and check in and see how this stuff is landing with you all. Again, it's not really rocket science, but again, I'm hoping that I've heard from other people and just my own personal experience that these things are really important. So, is our pace okay? I know it's a lot of going through. And again, don't hesitate to be like, hey, Eydie, slow down or I have a question. But we're going to keep going. It's good to see your faces. And we'll keep going. And like I said, don't hesitate to stop me and let's just press on. Chrome tab, share. Okay. Just going to talk a little bit. Can you see it? Can somebody tell me if you can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the hierarchy of clients' needs must be respected with safety prioritized. So why? Okay. A useful framework for prioritizing client needs and addressing them sequentially is, of course, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Although it's unlikely, I don't know the questions that Maslow's hierarchy of needs would ever be explicitly asked about in the examination. It's a tool that you can use to repeatedly help prioritize problems or order actions based on client needs. So again, it's that cognitive and effective processes and planning that you can use. So, if as you're studying, if you're not super familiar, like pull this up and like as you're trying to prioritize clients' needs, this Maslow's hierarchy is a great tool. Remember that we as social workers must always address health and safety issues before moving on to anything that relates to psychological functioning, such as self-esteem. So, probably something kind of cold in here. Just important to just remember and think about. When questions include answers that screen for or attend to the health and safety of clients, test takers must examine the response choice carefully to see if there is explicit wording which indicates clients are in danger or at risk of harming others. If so, this concern must be addressed before any other actions are taken. Hi, little Hildy. Okay, steps in the process must not be skipped because they take too long or will not solve problems. For example, a question may ask what a social worker should do first when having an issue with a colleague. So, this is often a question on the exam, actually. Although speaking directly to the colleague may not seem as expedient as going to a supervisor, it's always appropriate to address the issue with the colleague before going up the chain of command. I don't think I've ever talked to someone who's taken the social work exam that hasn't had a question like this. Like, your colleague is doing something inappropriate. What should you do? Should you, not report it? Should you call the board of social work? Should you talk to your supervisor? Should you talk to the colleague? The answer is always start with the colleague. There are not long waiting lists, scarce. So, this is important too. There are not long waiting lists, scarce resources, or delays in referrals that exist in scenarios unless they are explicitly stated. So we know that in actual practice, social workers encounter these realities daily and often base their decisions and actions to ensure results despite the constraints. These factors must not influence selecting a response choice unless they are explicitly stated in the question. So if it's a question, at your agency that housing takes a really long time, or getting services takes a really long time, or getting a bed takes a really long time, you don't assume that unless it's stated. Like, don't I can't choose that answer because it takes 8 years to get on a HUD house. You know what I'm saying? So don't make any assumptions about any questions unless something is stated. Don't build it based on what we know about scarcity or delays in referrals or long waiting lists. Often knowledge about the processes themselves are being assessed rather than the outcomes. Knowing what to do in a particular situation. Unless there is a compelling reason, such as safety, which is explicitly stated in scenarios, test takers should adhere to the sequencing in established protocols, such as chains of command or documentation procedures. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Another critical tool to assist when selecting the correct answer is the problem-solving process. So again, think about, I'm going to give a little example here: engagement, assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation, termination, all of those things that we do in the problem-solving process. Understanding the goal of each phase and the task to be completed therein is critical, because many questions on the exam focus on making sure that things are happening in the correct order. For example, if questions are about first meeting with clients, again, going back to the question, right? When you first meet with clients, the activities of the social worker must focus on engagement. So if you read a question quickly, when meeting with a client, the activities, and you missed the first meeting with the clients, right? So some of those questions, there are clues in there that help you can see, okay, this question must be about engaging, or this question might be about something different. Engagement includes finding out why clients are there and why they are seeking services now, explaining the role of social workers and what to expect in treatment, listening to clients as they explain their situations, and explaining the limits of confidentiality. I would argue that engagement is about way more than that, because if we don't engage well, that's the art of really positioning yourself to understand the sacred nature of human beings, and who they are, made in the image of God, and how do we engage with them well. But we're probably not going to be asked that on the exam. Including references to specific meetings or activities completed are clues for determining what phase of the problem-solving process social workers and clients are in, and what activities are appropriate next. So that's why it's really important for you to look at the question again, because it's going to give you clues, and you always want to think about process: engage, assess, intervene, evaluate, and all of the little things that come in there. And that's why I say going back and looking at the 9 competencies, the generalist competencies, are super, super important for you to have those and hold those as you're thinking about how you're, especially in those questions about clients, if you're looking at competencies 6, 7, 8, and 9, right? And how do we do those things? And you have done that in a lot of your coursework to understand what that looks like. Actions by social workers are quite different in engagement than they are in termination. So although questions rarely explicitly state the phase, it can be identified by what has occurred, such as, quote, when gathering information on the problem, that would indicate assessment, right? Now you're trying to figure out more about what's going on. That's assessment. Or when developing the contract, that's planning, right? Also, this is really important. It may be useful to classify answers into the phases in which they would occur in order to select what comes first or what comes next. You will see a lot of questions on the exam that say first in all capitals like that, or next. So pay attention to that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that now, focusing on question formatting and wording. So some of the things that you can pay attention to. Is there a qualifying word in the question? Is there something in capitals? Is there something that is a proper name? Is there a theory? Is the age of the client mentioned in the question? If the age of the client is mentioned, then it's for a reason. Is this question testing the application of a specific theory, perspective, or practice model? So again, these are things to think about when you're reading your questions. Are conclusions about scenarios supported by explicit wording? Are there quotation marks in the questions or the answers? What is the stem of the question that needs to be identified to select the correct answer? Do questions begin with verbs that can provide some assistance? Does the answer explicitly or implicitly involve the client? Or is an answer being selected solely because it contains social work jargon or buzzwords. So these are some of the things that like go back to that original thing that I said about understanding and looking at the question before you ever really start looking at your 4 options for answers. So first, is there a qualifying word in the question? Many questions contain keywords that are extremely important and distinguish the correct from the incorrect answers. Sometimes those are capitalized, but not always. In addition, they can usually be seen near the end of the question. Example would be the best. What is the best? What is the next? What is the least? What is the most? What should come first? What should you not do? Okay, you'll see a lot of those capitalized. And in one of our, I think it's one of the practice questions we do, sometimes you want to jump to the answer because you think it's the right answer. But if you go back to the question says, what is the least approach, or least favorable outcome? So again, making sure that you take the time to look at those qualifying keywords that are going to give you a clue to what the right answer is. And I'm going to say this too, like, I think using these strategies we're talking about is so important that even if you didn't have like all the knowledge that you needed, you can really, I think, make educated guess and do really well. Whenever a qualifying word is contained in a question, it is the key to selecting the correct answer from the incorrect ones and is directly related to the concept being assessed. So if it's, again, what is the first thing, you're going to go immediately, okay, they must be talking about engagement. Or if they've already kind of talked about that, they must be talking about assessment, right? Put the qualifying word in front of each answer when reading it to ensure that the focus on this keyword is maintained. Repeat the qualifying word before reading each answer. By inserting the qualifying word before each response choice, you are less likely to get distracted by words in answers which might not be salient. And again, you might not need to do this for a lot of the questions because maybe you really do know them. But I still encourage you, if you feel like you know them, don't just like, our brains do funny things when we're stressed and when we're taking tests. Like, slow down and read the question, even if you think it's like okay, I think I know this, or I know I know this. Still take the time to look at it. Qualifying words when present are the most important factors to consider when selecting between answers. So again, best, next, least, most, first, not, and sometimes there's other qualifying words in there as well. What are we going to do, or what to know about if the age of the client is mentioned in the question? If the ages of the client are included in the vignette, they must be considered, as age often provides relevant information for selecting correct response choices. We'll talk about that a little bit. For example, having an imaginary friend at the age of 4 is very different from having an imaginary friend at the age of 34. And we're going to have some questions like that when we get to the questions we'll do together. Imaginary friends in childhood are an extension of pretend play, and that is a part of Piaget's pre-operational stage. So that's something that is considered normal development. However, having them later in life can be an indicator of psychosis resulting from an hallucination or a delusion. Thus, in the former instance, this behavior is typical, which would require no special intervention, whereas in the latter, it's necessary to do a mental status exam or refer for psychiatric evaluation. So, again, looking at age and making sure you're tying your option, whatever you choose, to what the implications are about that. Additionally, confidentiality and consent are handled differently for young children as compared with adults. So if questions refer to clients generally, answers are not age dependent. When studying, you do not need to memorize the exact ages at which individuals leave one stage of development or reach another. They're not going to ask you that. However, when mentioned in questions, age can be useful to indicate where clients are in their life course and what may be expected, through as infants or children or teenagers or whatever, or adults or elderly, all of those things. Okay, the next thing we kind of talked about when I went through all the questions you should ask is this question testing the application of a specific theory, perspective, or practice model? So the ASWB examinations require you to know basic knowledge about many theories, practice models, and perspectives related to social work. Either if you're an undergrad or grad, we all learn and do a lot of our work based on different theories and practice, learning different models of intervention. A theory, as you know, is a set of interrelated concepts that are organized in a way that explains aspects of everyday life. And a practice model is a way in which a theory is operationalized. And a perspective is a point of view that is usually broader and at a higher level of abstraction, i.e., the strengths perspective. So having a basic understanding of various theories, practice models, and perspectives, as well as the terms they are rooted in, is necessary. So all this to say, and I think in one of those links that I shared in the beginning, I know I looked at it today, but there is something that has an overview of like the main social work theories. I would make sure that you kind of have a sense of what those are and how they're used, and be prepared to answer some questions about that. Oh, here it is. I'm just going to open this. Can you see this now? The 6 important theories in social work. Someone answer. Oh, share this tab
Slides
instead.
anymore.
Pardon?
I can't see your slides anymore.
Okay, can you see now?
No.
Did that just happen that you couldn't see my slides?
I think when you started talking about theories versus practice models.
Okay,
I
hold
can
on. Let me
still
go.
see them. I can see the 6 important.
I can see all of the slides too.
You can see the 6 important theories?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make sure you all get this, and I'm going to go back to the slides in a minute. But the 6 important theories: social learning theory, systems theory, psychosocial development theory, psychodynamic theory, social exchange theory, rational choice therapy. And then this also talks about the 6 practice models. So I'm going to make sure that you have that. I think that like a read through of those is important. But you are going to have questions about theory, perspective, practice model, etc. Okay, I got to get back to share this tab. Can you see my slides again, the yellows and black ones, the bumblebees?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't, but it might just be a me problem.
You were able to see them before?
I was. So I don't know what's going on. I can just wait. Oh, wait. Okay, now I can see them. There we
Okay,
go.
good. I just opened them and closed. Okay, good. All right. No, I can't move. Okay. Another question, kind of when I made that list of questions, are conclusions about scenarios supported by explicit wording. Perhaps the biggest mistake that you will make when reading the vignettes is adding material to these questions. So I kind of talked about this a little bit before. And it's sort of human nature to do that because we all have gathered practice experience. And so what I think is helpful about this for you to be aware that when you're doing that and not to do that. So don't add material to questions, right? To make it more, remember generalist, 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 generalist. Because you do it unconsciously when you mistakenly think clients or situations in their own practice are similar to those described in the question. Don't do that. Just look at the question. Think about generalist social work knowledge. Don't add anything about your own expertise, which is not to say that's not important. Just don't add it to the question because that will change your answer. Social workers often view scenarios through like that micro practice lens, as most of us work with directly with individuals or families. However, a client in a scenario does not need to be an individual. It can be a family, an organization, a group, or community. So an assumption should not be made that the term client refers to a single individual. It is always advisable to reread the questions to ensure that any conclusions are supported by empirical evidence and not just assumptions, which are not sustained by how the question is worded. So again, coming back to the importance of like reading the question and not adding to it based on your experience. So I think if you're aware of that and go, wait a minute, like I know that because I work with people who have been adjudicated by the court and who are in substance treatment programs, right? Substance use disorder treatment programs. That is not what they're asking. They're asking generalists. So I think the awareness about that we unconsciously add things is really important to remember. Okay, next, are there quotation marks in the questions or answers? Some questions include words or phrases that are in quotation marks, and that will generally mean it directly relates to getting the correct answers. For example, a vignette may describe a client who walks into the first therapy session and states, "I don't have to tell you anything. I don't want to be here," followed by a question asking about what a social worker's best response is. Although this question does not explicitly state that it's asking how to best address resistance, it is doing so as evidenced by the client statement. So you have a client who is resisting. Words in quotation marks are there for a reason and usually have information that is essential for selecting the correct answers. So if you look at that example above, I don't have to tell you anything and I don't want to be here. That's demonstrating resistance. So like what? Just look at that quotation and what's it telling you? What does it mean? Is it tied to something we know about clients' behavior or development or treatment protocols? Quotation marks can also be in answers. Sometimes entire answers are quoted statements, such as those which represent social workers' most appropriate responses to clients' concerns or behaviors in scenarios. You, as the test takers, must evaluate words or phrases and answers with the same diligence that they do so in the questions. So make sure you're looking at both the questions and answers and that sort of symbiotic relationship. And where are the clues? There are always clues, which is kind of reassuring because if you don't know the answer, these kinds of strategies can help you make a really educated guess. What is the stem of the question that needs to be identified to select the correct answer? Multiple choice questions are composed of 3 parts: stems that identify the questions or the problems, keys that are the best to answers to the questions, and then distractors that are plausible but incorrect answers. Often, the questions have incomplete sentences at the end of the questions that contain valuable information that must be considered. Stems may focus on the use of particular practice modalities or theoretical approaches. For example, a vignette that ends with using a task-centered treatment approach, a social worker should requires looking at a response choices to see which relates to an intervention that is brief, highly structured, and focused on quick results in which a client can take a very active role. So that's again why it's important to review theories and how those are applied, because we know about task-centered approaches to treatment, that they're quick and focused and highly structured, right? And if you can't remember for sure what task-centered is because you only read about it and you haven't really done it, it kind of tells you that, right? A task-centered is like probably brief. And there's probably going to be answers that relate to that and some that don't. So the correct answer is going to be different if a social worker responding to the same situation was asked to use a psychodynamic model. So that's where you would be like, okay, wait a second. You know, this doesn't necessarily align with psychodynamic. It aligns more with task-centered. A question is like a funnel, with the last sentence right before the answers providing critical information about what is being asked. So think about it that way too. What's bolded, what's in quotation marks, and what's right before, right at the end of the question. It is often the stem of the question requiring test takers to apply or use all the information contained earlier in the question. So you might go back again to the question to get some clues. Rereading the last sentence in the question can be helpful as it focuses on the area of inquiry and avoid falling for distractors like answers that are related but not directly related to the focus of the question. So, yeah, and we'll get to that when we get to our questions. Do answers begin with verbs that can provide some assistance? Many of the response choices to questions on the examination begin with verbs. The verbs can provide valuable assistance, especially if you're debating between multiple answers. So, for example, some answers describe social workers taking action like tell or arrange without mentioning any roles for clients. These answers do not use an empowerment approach, which may help rule them out. Explore and engage are verbs that usually indicate that social workers are working with clients to arrive at solutions. Ignore or wait may indicate that social workers are not helping clients address critical problems when needed. Verbs can also be associated with phases of the problem solving process, like assure is often associated with engagement. And assess, ask, and determine best describe assessment, right? Assuring, like you're building relationship, you're trying to engage with them, assure them that you're going to come up with a plan. Assessing, asking, determining is about assessment, right? Okay, next question. Oh, this is still verbs. If answers are supposed to occur at certain phases of the helping process, verbs must be examined to see if they are consistent with the requisite tasks. In addition, test takers are often asked to order actions of social workers. If answers represent different responses, examining the verbs to assist with ordering is helpful. So acknowledge is usually done before explore or explain. You're acknowledging that there's an issue. You're acknowledging that they've been through a very difficult transition. And then you're going to begin to explore and ask them to explain more. Okay. Examining verbs which begin response choices is a helpful tool to use when two or more response choices appear equally viable. So if you're like, wow, these two both look like great answers. Okay, let's think about those verbs and what kinds of clues are in there. Not all answers are going to be in with verbs. It can only be used for some question formats. However, close attention must be paid to verb choice in some instances as it provides a concise way to determine if an action by a social worker is appropriate given the material in question, as well as where it is to occur within the problem-solving process. So questions and problem-solving process, your thinking about your competencies 6 through 9 and all of the intricate details that are in there and what kinds of clues those verbs can give you about the process, about how we engage with a client, which could be an individual, a family, a community, a group, an org. All right. So can you begin to sort of see how those things all come together? And that our formal processes of engaging with people can be the same. And so those verbs give clues to where you are in that continuum. And so by looking at that and going back to the root of the question, that can help you arrive at the answer. And sometimes, again, like I said, if two seem equally viable, take a look at both of them and see if those verbs are different in that sort of continuum of care that we provide. Okay, does the answer explicitly or implicitly involve the client? So we as social workers view clients as experts in their own experiences and situations, and they should be regarded as such. Often good answers on the examinations are not correct, as they only mention social workers acting and do not involve collaboration with clients. So even if it's a good answer, if you are ignoring one that is an option that allows you to collaborate with a client, then you should really take a look at the question and examine it and make sure that usually probably the involving collaboration with clients is going to take precedent over another good answer. Even when actions may seem appropriate and could be, they may be incorrect as they do not mention the roles of the client. So think about how important your answers are. And if there's two pretty good ones, choose the one with the client because that's always the right thing to do. View your answers carefully, asking whether clients are mentioned explicitly or sometimes implicitly. Answers based on social workers making decisions about tasks in the problem-solving process, such as appropriate interventions, are not as good as those which base these decisions on discussions with clients. Even when social workers have sound advice or can take actions to assist clients, these answers are not preferred over those which mention working with clients to determine the reasons for the problems or intervene. The involvement of the client is often a crucial factor in answer selection. So, all that to say, the involvement of the client is often crucial. Is an answer being selected solely because it contains social work jargon or buzzwords? So the exam itself aims to determine whether you really understand the concepts being tested or are just selecting answers because they sound correct or have answers that have social work buzzwords such as rapport, empathy, support system, joining with a client, strengths perspective, from a client's perspective, and so on. So sometimes you might have a hard time eliminating response choices that contain jargon. That is important to effective process. These are key concepts that are the cornerstone of competent social work services. However, a word or catchphrase does not make a response choice correct. An answer may not be correct because the other parts of it are inadequate, false, or simply do not address the problem needing attention. So be careful when those kinds of things come up and they're jargony. Make sure, again, is the answer you're selecting really addressing the problem that needs attention? When seeing social work buzzwords and response choices, it is essential to read the answers critically. Perhaps they will be not as appealing if synonyms for these buzzwords are used in their place. Often incorrect answers are made more appealing by adding social work jargon to see if test takers will be lured in by their inclusion. That's so tricky, isn't it? Most of the time, jargon is in the incorrect answers, serving as distractors. So beware of jargon. They're trying to trap you. Test takers should not be influenced by the inclusion of fancy social work terms and answers and need to select response choices based on their substantive merits, ensuring that they directly relate to assessments of the chosen service interventions. I think that's what I meant by that. Okay, I'm gonna, I think after this, we're gonna move into our questions. So stop sharing for a minute. How's everybody doing? Hanging in there? Okay. I will say, I have a friend, we also, when we're talking about things, we often declare boring. I know this stuff is kind of boring, but I am telling you, it is super helpful. And if you can begin to again, before we go to break, I'm going to ask everybody to just check in with me, turn on your screens, and I want to hear one thing that is super helpful so far to you, or enlightening, or makes you feel like, okay, this is going to be a strategy that will be really helpful. So who wants to go first? Okay, Emma.
Yeah, I think being in like a very clinical setting this past year has made my mind like shift to clinical. So reminding myself constantly that this is generalist and like knowledge based in the generalist level, I think is going to be huge for me.
Excellent. Thanks, Emma. Someone else.
I can go. I did this when I took the LSW exam a few years ago, but like really looking at the keywords like first, best, last, just rereading that to comprehend that part is super helpful so just kind of keeping that same strategy.
Excellent. Thanks, Alexis.
Not getting sucked in by the words. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say not getting sucked in by the buzzwords and just thinking critically, like about the meaning underneath what they're trying to say.
Yep, excellent. Thank you, Anushka. Who else?
Breaking down the speech patterns in the questions to understand what they're really trying to get at versus what they're like maybe hinting towards using jargon.
Yep, excellent. Thanks, Ashley.
For me, it's the reminder that it's the theory, it's the practice, it's not reality. I've been a social worker for a long time, so I think it's probably easier for me to do that when I was a BSW than currently now. So that's a good reminder.
Excellent. Thanks, Miranda.
For
I
me,
like when you,
go ahead, Christy, go ahead.
sorry, I like when you were saying don't read too much into it, just see the question for what it is and read it and then reread it, get the understanding before you go looking for the answer. I think that's going to be really helpful because if you read it and understand it, when you start looking at the answers, it'll be like, okay, I can get rid of this and get rid of this and maybe focus on these things. So that was very helpful for me.
Good. Thanks, Christy.
I think for me, definitely going back to like the problem solving, like the steps through that to kind of like see like where the client is and then to then make a decision going off of that.
Great. Thanks, Grace.
I'd say the buzzwords too, and just that tip of replacing those with a different word and see if it still makes sense or not.
Great. Thanks, Nathan.
I liked talking about like the verbs and like how each verb can be associated with like a stage of the helping process and just that little tip.
Yeah, and to add to that, just as a reminder, like think about your 6 to 9, right? Six competencies, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and don't forget to read. Put Maslow's up there, put your competencies and the little behaviors associated with that, and put that all together. Excellent. Who else? Rachel and Preston, right?
Yeah, I think I just need the reminder to slow down. So keep
Yeah,
reading that question as many times as I need to really like make sure that I understand and slow down. It's not a race. There's time.
excellent.
I think for me, and my field supervisor had told me this like a couple of days ago when I asked him about the exam. He said like, and you mentioned this earlier, like not thinking about it like the real world, but thinking about the questions in the perfect world, like just reading the questions how they are and not like thinking of like our perfect or like our, how do I say this exactly? But like thinking about it, like you said, like a generalist view and not thinking about it like how we are in our own fields right now.
Yeah,
So yeah.
great. Thanks, Preston. Did everybody get to go?
I can go quick. I just really
Okay.
like how you reminded us just the importance of like flagging questions if we don't know right away and being able to go back and even just the thought of not skipping around because I know especially for me taking tests it's kind of more of like I have anxiety with it so it's easy to kind of be like oh I don't know this like let me just skip around but just reminding us to read the questions and then just take it one by one and if you don't know it you can flag it and go back to it.
But still answer it
Yes.
the first time around. Excellent. Do we get everybody? Okay. All right, let's take a 5:12. Let's come back at 5:20. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work through 25 or 30 questions and then answer. We'll talk together again. And then I'm going to share 2 practice tests with you that you're going to be able to take. I wanted to do them online so we could use what is that thing called? But you can't, we use it in class sometimes, Kaylin and Preston. What is that called?
Kahoot?
Kahoot, but it doesn't let you put in enough words to get all the questions because it's fun, but we'll do it a different way. We're much more professional than Kahoot, right? All right. Everyone, we'll see you then at 7:20 your time. Thank you. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're going to jump into the test prep questions. And so I want you to, again, I think it's helpful to, I guess we wait a couple more minutes here because all I see is Emma. Here comes Rachel, Christy. So remember, like test taking is these strategies are things you're going to want to kind of practice. And I want to make sure that I have everybody who's here. We'll wait for a minute for everyone to come in. So Kaylin, Christy. Are you all excited that you're graduating soon? It's crazy. It goes fast, doesn't it? Emma Dalton, Rachel, Nathan, Rachel Lane, Shka, Grace. As we're waiting for everyone, Preston and Miranda, don't forget that there are you should have received some information from Deb about the FACI that everyone has to take, the Foundational Curriculum Assessment Instrument. Make sure you do that in the exit survey. That Foundational Curriculum Assessment is required for graduation. So you don't get a grade for it. It's just you have to complete it. It's something we have to do. So don't forget about that. Okay, I am going to share my screen again, and we are going to hop into the questions. So remember these questions, try to start beginning to, some of them are a little bit more challenging, but that's because I want you to begin to think about these strategies, okay? So let's jump into the first one. Somehow. Why won't it go? Okay. A 7-year-old client is refusing to sleep in his own bed at night. When the parents sit with him in his room, he is fine. When they leave the room, he begins to cry. When they come back in, he stops crying. This is an example of. So think about, what do you think this is, and what is it that they're asking, and what is it that we need to know? Does anybody want to say what they think the answer is? I was going to say drop it in the chat, but that would require me to go back. Anybody, why don't you drop what you think the answer is in the chat? Okay, either I'm going to ask Nathan or Alexis, what are we at? Okay, first, I guess let's do it this way. I'm going to go over to the answer. What theory is this? Whose theory is this? Skinner, right? And so I want to make sure. So the correct answer is A, operant conditioning. Operant conditioning occurs when behavior is followed by a reinforcer or when reinforcement is withheld. In the scenario above, the child's difficulties at bedtime are being reinforced by the parent's response to the child's tears. The child's tears are reinforced by the parent's return to sit with the child. Classical conditioning is not correct because classical conditioning entails conditioning an individual to associate pleasant feelings with a stimulus that has been anxiety producing. For example, learning to feel relaxed rather than anxious when flying. Punishment cycles, answer C, is not a correct answer, as the child in this case is not being punished. Higher order conditioning, D, is not correct because the higher order conditioning involves pairing a neutral stimulus with a conditioned stimulus to produce the same response. So this is a case of an exam question that you need to know Skinner, right? But we do understand that this is asking about theory and how that's applied. Okay. I'm actually going to skip the next question, and we're going to go to this one. In a session with a woman suffering from depression, The client recounts in great detail a dream she had in which she brought a gun and took her life. She tells the social worker specifically how she plans to carry out the dream. The social worker should A. Share the information with the family, B. Develop a no suicide contact, C. Hospitalize the patient, or D. Ignore the dream. So, how would a generalist answer this? If you think about generalist practice, and why don't you drop in the chat, maybe a few more people this time, what you think the correct answer is. Is it share information with the family, develop a no suicide contract, hospitalize the patient, or ignore the dream? All right, let's see what, okay. All right, so the correct answer to this question is C. Hospitalize the patient. The patient has stated that she intends to attempt suicide, and she has a specific plan to achieve this goal. These conditions are associated with high risk for suicide. The woman needs to be hospitalized until she is no longer at risk. Sharing the information with the family is not the best answer because, if it is appropriate, it will come after the client's safety has been secured through hospitalization. Developing a no suicide contract is not correct because developing a no suicide contract is not an immediate enough plan and has questionable effectiveness. Ignoring the dream is not correct because a responsible social worker should never ignore a dream as disturbing and concrete as this. Okay. The next one. A client calls his social worker to discuss an argument he and his wife have had while they have been vacationing in Mexico. The social worker has been seeing the couple together, and the wife is unaware of the phone call. The best course of action is to. All right, so here we have, think about the funnel question, think about the keywords, think about what are we seeing in this question? Is the best course of action to continue the conversation with the husband? Tell the husband that discussion will need to wait until the couple returns from their vacation so the wife can also participate. Arrange a phone session or refuse to speak with the husband. Let's see your answers. Okay. The correct answer for this question correct answer is B. Tell the husband that discussion will need to wait until the couple returns from their vacation so the wife can also participate in the discussion. Couple issues are best dealt with in a conjoint in-person session. Continuing the conversation with the husband is not correct because the couple needs to have the conversation, not the social worker and the husband. She's been seeing them as a couple. Arranging a phone session is not correct because a phone session would not be productive as an in-person session. Whoops. And is not required. Refusing to speak with the husband is not correct, as the social worker can explain to the husband the need to wait for the session rather than refusing. Good. Question. A social worker receives a new client who is seeking cognitive behavioral therapy, which is not the social worker's treatment of expertise. The social worker should attempt this intervention, refer the client to an expert, explore the client's reasons for wanting cognitive behavioral therapy, and use his own techniques as he or she is well trained to meet the client's needs. What do you think? It's kind of hard to see. Let's see, 529, see. Okay. So the correct answer is indeed C. And I'm going to I'll go over to that. But before I go to the slide that explains everything, what are some of the clues in the actual question that can help you recognize that C is the correct answer? Like the verbs. How do you relate the verbs to the question? Can someone explain that?
I said B, but I'm realizing now that the client is seeking cognitive behavioral therapy, so you're probably trying to figure out why they're wanting it.
And what else the client is seeking? What other word in the question, it gives us a really strong clue?
they're a new client, so it's probably like the first time you're seeing them.
Yep. Yeah. So it doesn't mean, I mean, use your own techniques. I mean, the client might not know cognitive behavioral therapy, and that might not be best. So it's a new client, they're seeking it. And so your job now is a part of that. Which competency is that?
Assessment.
Or maybe a little bit before that, because you're still, it could kind of bleed into assessment a little bit, but you're not exactly, I would say that assessment would be more like, okay, let's do, some more actual use like standardized tests to do the assessment. This you're trying to still engage with the client to understand and explore their reasons as a new client. So I would say engagement. The correct answer is C, explore the client's reasons for wanting cognitive behavioral therapy. As the social worker discusses this with the client, it may become evident that the social worker is able to provide the services the client desires. Alternatively, the discussion may reveal the need to refer the client elsewhere. Attempting this intervention, A, is not correct because the social worker should be trained and competent in the interventions he or she uses. Referring the client to an expert, answer B, is not the best because the social worker should find out more about the client's request before referring the client to an expert in cognitive behavioral therapy. Using the social worker's own techniques as he or she is well trained to meet the client's needs is not correct because the client has asked specifically for CBT and should be part of the decision making process regarding whether other techniques could be beneficial. Next question. A 5-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy are found by the boy's mother in the garage with their pants down. They do not appear to be engaging in sexual activity. The mother calls her social worker for the advice. The best way for the social worker to respond to the mother is normalize the situation as this is common age for this type of activity, suggest the boy have a psychiatric exam, have the parents of the children come in together, see the boy individually. So, what are some of the clues in this question that are important?
They already have a social worker, so it's not the first discussion they've had, the age of the children, 5 and 4,
Yeah,
and the best way.
Yeah, so the age of the children is really important. So I'm not sure if you all are dropping. It's hard for me to tell where they start. So most people here are choosing A.
Yeah.
And yes, A. Sorry, was someone going to say something?
Sorry, never mind.
Yep. So A is the best answer. Normalize the situation as this is common age for this type of activity. This is a question dependent on knowledge of child development. The other three answers suggest the boy have a psychiatric exam. Having the parents of the children come together and seeing the boy individual are all not correct, as the actions described are not warranted based on the information present in the question. You found they have their pants down, and that is what you know. And you know that they're not engaging in any sexual activity, and that this is a normal kind of things that is developmental. Not that it should be completely ignored by the parent or, whatever, but as a social worker, you normalize the situation with the family and say this is a part of normal child development. Okay, next question. A 36-year-old man experiencing sexual dysfunction comes to a social worker for help. He is not married and has recently been dating several women. He states that he has been sexually active with all of them. First and foremost, the social worker needs to A, determine whether his sexual partners have included men, B, determine whether he is having difficulties with all the women, C, determine whether the women are experiencing sexual difficulties, or D, speak with the women. So look at the question again. 36-year-old man experiencing sexual dysfunction comes to the social worker for help. He is not married and he has recently been dating several women. He states that he has been sexually active with all of them. First and foremost, the social worker needs to determine whether his sexual partners have included men, determine whether he's having difficulties with all the women, whether the women are experiencing sexual difficulties, or speak with the women. So, what ones can we rule out?
Speak with the women.
Okay, yes. What else could we rule out?
I think we can rule out C
Why? Why?
because they're not the clients.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I would also rule out A because there's no mention of, I mean, it's discussing that he's with women.
Right. So correct answer is B, determine whether he is having difficulties with all the women. The question asks the social worker to identify the first thing that he or she needs to do with a client. Therapy starts out with an assessment of the problem the patient is experiencing. As part of an assessment of this client's problem, it is important to determine whether he is having similar problems with all of the women. This will be an important factor in achieving an accurate understanding of the problem. Determining whether his sexual partners have included men is not correct, as the client has not mentioned men as sexual partners, only women. Determining whether women are experiencing sexual difficulties and speaking with the women are not correct because it is the client who has asked you for help, not the women. So right on target there. There will be a question about this on the exam, I believe. In the 1976 landmark case of Tarasoff versus Regents of the University of California, the decision by the court was an effort to ensure that A, confidentiality is maintained, B, suicidal clients can be detained, C, substance abuse is not a valid argument for murder, D, the individual is protected before confidentiality is protected. So I just think you need to know this because I've never heard anybody say have an exam where this wasn't on it. But I mean that could change because but what can we rule out here? Or does anyone know the let me see if you guys are okay. Oh no, I went backwards. Okay. Let's see what you all are putting down. 537. Okay, is that everybody? Is the D answer, people? 536. So did people put down D for this? Okay. That is, I believe, the correct answer. I'm not back on there. Yep, D. The individual is protected before confidentiality. The other answers are not correct as they are not relevant to the Tarasoff case, which was about harm to another person. So that's just a case that people generally know about that you should probably know about. During a play therapy session with a 6-year-old child who had been sexually abused, the child begins to rub his genital area against the social worker's leg. The least appropriate action for the social worker to take would be. Now, let's pause and look at the question for a minute without looking at the answers. What are the important things in this question?
The child's age.
Yeah.
Past
I think
abuse.
also
Sorry, past abuse.
Past abuse and
I think also the word least as opposed to like most or anything like that.
yeah. So least is really important here. So we know it's a child who's been sexually abused. So the least appropriate action, what do you think it would be? Ignoring the behavior, disengaging the child, discussing with the child what is happening. Ensure this is listed in the case report. I'm going to pop over here and see what you all are answering. Okay, people are answering A. The least appropriate action for the social worker would be to ignore the behavior. The question asks for the least appropriate action. Behaviors of this type should never be ignored. They are often indicative of sexual abuse and, at a minimum, need to be interrupted. All other options are appropriate courses of action to take in a case such as this. So again, I think for this, sometimes we forget to look at least and would be like most appropriate. You know what I mean? So just make sure you're looking at least and understanding that it's sexual abuse and certainly something that we need to tend to. So ignoring it is the least. In counseling with a client at a correctional center who is coming up for parole, it becomes clear to the social worker that the client plans to continue assaulting women. The social worker is asked for his professional opinion regarding the client's parole. The social worker should A, state his concern about the client's intention to continue assaulting women. B, ask for more time to evaluate the client. C, not discuss the case because this is confidential information. And D, get a no assault contract from the client. So, what are a couple of the words that are really important in the question here?
Me, I see something that stands out to me is that the social worker is asked for his professional opinion. So I feel like that adds weight to it. Um,
Mhm.
that adds weight. It's not like, oh, I was talking at the bar and I was talking about this client who's like a real danger to society. No, he's asked to like report his professional opinion, so that informs my answer choice.
Okay, good. What else?
Um, like it becomes clear to the social worker that the client plans to continue to assaulting women, so that points me to like safety of the general population not being met. So, A.
Okay, so if okay, let's try to make a couple correlations. If it says in the question it becomes clear to the social worker that the client plans, then what can we eliminate from the answers?
I think we can eliminate B
Why?
because it becomes clear, makes it seem that the social worker has already been exploring this and evaluating this with the client.
Okay, excellent. And what else? Okay, so and I'm not sure who said the professional. Was that you, Anushka? The professional
Yeah.
opinion? Okay, so if what else could we eliminate from the questions because they're asking us for a professional opinion?
C, I think.
And why so?
Because it's not, again, it's not like discussing the client with a random. It's discussing the client in the context of this treatment setting.
Yes. The client is asked for his professional opinion, most likely in a court, right? So, or in that context of a hearing. So, not discussing the case because it's confidential. No, you've been asked as a professional for your opinion on this client. And so yes, let's eliminate B and C. Is there anything else that we can eliminate?
I think we could eliminate D.
Why
Um,
so, Nathan? Is
be-
that Nathan or
yep,
yeah?
yep. Because it's clear to the social worker that this client is planning to continue assaulting women, so that presents some imminent risk to others, and I don't think just the contract would prevent harm to others.
Right.
Well, and if they're in a correctional center, he's already in a social contract to not do the things that he's supposed to not do.
Yeah, exactly. So correct. The correct answer is A. State the concern about the client's intention to continue assaulting women. Social workers are ethically bound to be honest in their evaluations of clients. Asking for more time to evaluate is not correct because the question state the client's intention to continue assaulting women is clear, so the social worker does not need additional time to evaluate the client. Not discussing the case because this is confidential is not correct because the social worker has been asked for his professional opinion. Getting a no assault contract from the client is not correct because that would be of no use in this situation since the client has clearly stated his plan to continue assaulting women. Very good. A social worker, Ethan, is providing supervision to another social worker, Jay, who is working on an advanced license. Jay becomes sexually involved with a client and tells Ethan about the relationship. Ethan's responsibility is to what? Report Jay to the state social work licensing board, work with Jay to understand his behavior and to refer the client to another social worker, see the client himself, or insist Jay seek treatment. What do you think? What can we eliminate? Whoops.
I don't know, maybe A, because you said first, if there's something happening with your colleague, you should go to your colleague first. Um, so eliminate just going to the board without having, I don't know, talk to your colleague.
Okay, so I did say that. I think there are some exceptions to that rule. So let's go back to the question and look at the question. So where is there something in the question that might cause us to say this is something more than just going, like, I have an ethical obligation. It's not like, my client is, or yeah. Okay, I won't say that. What do you think that we see in the root of the question that might warrant an exception to what I said before about, like, always talk um, to your client first, or to your coworker first?
It talks about our responsibility, our ultimate duty.
In the question?
Yeah. And so saying what is our responsibility. So obviously when you break an ethics, you break a policy, we are automatically meant to report. So what is our responsibility to do? What is our next action?
And so what is the ethical violation that is identified in the root of the question?
The patient and a practitioner relationship.
Yeah, the sexual involvement with
Yeah.
the client. And so in this particular case, and I apologize for that. I should have talked a little bit more about that there are exceptions. So when there's an ethical violation where a client is, there's sexual relationship, that would be a time when you would report J to the state licensing board. The correct answer is A, report J to the state social work licensing board. Social workers are ethically bound by the NASW Code of Ethics to report such incidents to their licensing board. Working with Jay to understand his behavior and referring the client to another social worker is not correct because Ethan is not Jay's social worker and it's not appropriate for him to intervene in this way as Jay needs to be reported. Seeing the client himself is not correct as Ethan seeing the client would be considered unethical. Insisting that Jay seek treatment is not correct because it will be the licensing board that will determine the course of action for a social worker who is sexually involved with a client. A new mother who has been seeing a social worker for postpartum depression tells the social worker that she has been thinking about drowning her baby and herself. In this situation, it is important for social workers to A, set up a no harm contract, B, inform his or her supervisor of the situation, C, report the case to Child Protective Services, D, have the mother committed. So, what do you think here? Is there anything that we can eliminate? And remember, if you're someone who has worked in a hospital or dealt with something like this, don't go to what you ended up doing in that case. Focus exactly on what you think a generalist social worker is going to do in this particular situation. She's been seeing the social worker for postpartum and has been thinking about drowning her baby and herself. What do you do? What can we eliminate?
Well, it's an emergency, so informing CPS or supervisor, those are going to take a long time. I would probably eliminate those.
You'd eliminate which ones?
I would eliminate. Now I'm second guessing everything I've ever thought. I want to just say have the mother committed because she's in danger and so is the baby. But I would eliminate the no harm contract.
I think you would be safe to do that because someone who's experiencing postpartum depression to that significant degree is not going to adhere to a no harm contract.
I would actually say that my instinct would be to inform my supervisor of the situation because then we could problem solve together.
I think that should be what you do, but I'm not sure that it is the most important and first thing that you would do. Because we're here. What is something in the root of the question that is going to direct you exactly to the answer? Who's she thinking about drowning?
She's thinking about drowning herself and her baby. Um,
Hmm.
I think ruling out the child protection also, because that's going to take some time to investigate and do things like that. So I say rule out C.
I was gonna say, working in healthcare, I can tell you it would be have the mother committed, because she's a risk to herself and a baby.
Okay, the answer to this one, I actually haven't looked at it, but I'm going to say that it's going to be C because we have a baby involved. And if you're calling Child Protective Services, they are there 24 hours and they're going to get someone out there immediately. That's not saying having someone committed takes time. A court, it has to be involved. I think you would talk to your supervisor, but that would be an immediate call because it's not just the woman, the mother, it's also the baby. So the correct answer is C. Report the case to Child Protective Services. All states require mental health professionals to file a report to CPS if they have reason to believe that a child has been or is in danger of being harmed. So legally, we have to report that right away. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't like go talk to your supervisor next, but the rule of law is, and your answer is always going to be if there is a child who is at risk of being harmed, you're always going to report that first. And then you can make that phone call to Child Protective Services and then go talk to your supervisor about it. But reporting the case to Child Protective Services is always the first thing. Like I said, all states require mental health professionals to file a report with CPS if they believe that the child could be harmed. Setting up a no contract is not correct because the safety of the child is paramount and the mother is suffering from postpartum depression and not in control of her feelings and actions. Informing the supervisor of the situation is not the best answer in this case, although informing the supervisor is a good step to take after fulfilling the legal requirement of reporting the situation to CPS. Having the mother committed is not correct because after CPS evaluates the condition of the mother, it would be the CPS staff that can have her committed to the hospital if that action is warranted. So, again, just think about whenever a child is in danger that we as mandated reporters have to make that call right away. Now, you're right. In some situation with child protection, that could take some time for them to come out. But in a situation like this, where the mother is thinking about that, my guess, at least in, Minnesota, that they'd have someone out there right away. So, and again, that's a good example of going, okay, we can't like say, oh, this is going to take a long time, so we better not do that. We just have to remember that always we have to make that call to Child Protective Services or Adult Protection Services or whatever it is first before we do anything else and get that. It's almost like if you've been trained in any kind of emergency like healthcare, you always call 911 first and then start emergency precaution CPR or whatever and following up because you really want to get that higher level of support activated. And it's the same thing here. You always want to make that call. They determine when they're going to come out or how. Then you can go talk to your supervisor and figure out what else you want to do as, in your professional role, but always call CPS first.
That's really hard for me because I'm in Wisconsin and I know that the CPS workers, I've had to leave messages and they're not all trained and licensed to even assess for that. So we would actually have called our crisis people first, then CPS, because otherwise there would not have been an emergency response in place for that.
Yeah. So, Miranda, I think again, that's an example of like kind of ASWB wanting people to understand that you have to notify, like in your state, if they're saying there's a crisis team, you would do that first, but you're not going to talk to your supervisor first. You're going to follow whatever the protocol is for a child who is at risk. And so if that's calling Child Protective Services first before those other examples, like, let me go back here. And again, like I really am happy you brought up that example because again, things are different in every state, and that's what they don't want you to do. So set up no harm contract. We know that that's not going to work. You, of course, are going to talk to your supervisor as soon as you can. You do not have any capacity probably right away. Getting people committed in different states, it's a different process. Who has the ability to do that? It usually takes some time for them to get in front of a judge. So, report the case to Child Protective Services in your particular state. Miranda, what would you do?
So we always report, but if it was a more severe situation like that, we would call dispatch first to do like a safety check on the individual and then tee up with CPS. Because it was a more urgent situation, we always report, but we would alert law enforcement first to get someone on the scene immediately and then partner with CPS.
Yeah. And I think that, again, that's an example of, luckily they didn't have that in the question, like call the law enforcement first or whatever. I think the root of this question is getting at making sure that you're notifying whatever the process is to notify CPS or whatever to get that thing, get that activated. Whatever that looks like, as opposed to those other options. You're not going to jump to civil commitment. You're not going to do a contract. And you're not going to, I guess, yes, you are going to talk to the supervisor, but again, you might not be able to get a hold of your supervisor right away. So it's the child protection, it's the reporting it to the authorities. That's really important. And I guess, again, yours is an excellent example of like things are different in other states, but that's the best answer to this particular question. So, all right, we will move on. During a session with a client, a social worker loses track of the conversation while daydreaming. The client asks the social worker if she's paying attention. The social worker should pretend she was thinking, be honest about what happened, talk with the client about her reasons for asking, end the session. So I'm going to pop over back and see what everyone's thinking. 538. Oh, we're way down here. Pop your answer in. What do you think? I'm going to go back here. Okay. The correct response for this, the correct answer is B, be honest about what happened. The quality of the therapeutic relationship is a function in large part of the extent to which a social worker responds to the client in an honest and forthright manner. So this is about engagement. Pretending that she was thinking is not correct, because for the social worker to pretend that she was thinking would be an insult to the client, as the client obviously knew what was going on. Talking with the client about her reason for asking and ending the session is not correct, because they are both ways of diverting the issue. A social worker sees a client walking toward her in the grocery store. The social worker should take her cue from the client, smile but say nothing, say hello, turn and go the other way. What do you think about this one? A social worker sees a client walking toward her in the grocery store. The social worker should get your answer in your head. The best answer to this situation is A, take her cue from the client. Ideally, the social worker would have determined beforehand what the client wants the social worker to do if they encounter each other in a public place. If she has not done this, she can determine how best to respond to the individual client by observing how he or she responds to the encounter. Smiling but saying nothing and saying hello are socially appropriate responses even when encountering a stranger, but these actions may be uncomfortable for the client. Turning and going the other way is not correct, because the client may misinterpret the social worker's response and feel rejected. All right, we'll keep pressing on. A social worker is trying to complete all her paperwork before she leaves for vacation the following day. It is midnight and she is aware that she needs to get home, pack her clothes, and get some sleep. She decides that because she only has 2 more notes to make in a client's file, she will take the file home and make the entries first thing in the morning. In this situation, the social worker is risking an unethical situation, managing her time properly, doing what is common practice, or violating the law. Go ahead and think about your answer, look at it, and we'll go to the answer in a minute. We're not going to discuss all of the questions in great detail. All right. I think the answer is A, risking an unethical situation. The social worker may or may not be doing what is common practice, but she definitely is risking an unethical situation. She risks breaching confidentiality by taking files to her home where others might see them. Managing her time poorly is not correct because she needs to manage time in ways that will not put her client at risk. Violating the law is not correct as she is not violating the law. Right, next question. While working with an elderly patient on a home health basis, the social worker becomes aware that she has developed numerous bruises on her legs. When the social worker asks about these bruises, the patient states that she often hits her legs with her walker when she is trying to get around. The social worker knows that she has used this walker for almost 2 years and has not had any problems before. The social worker is also aware that her daughter, who is her sole caretaker, has appeared very stressed out when she has run into her at her mother's home. The social worker needs to have the walker examined, assess for elder abuse, accept the client's explanation, or have a private meeting with the daughter. What do you think? Up your answers down here. All right. Oops. The correct answer is assess for elder abuse. It is unlikely that the patient has suddenly started having difficulties using the walker. The sudden appearance of bruising on the patient's legs and the absence of a reasonable explanation for the bruises in combination with the emotional condition of the woman's caretaker suggests the need to assess for elder abuse. Having the walker examined could be part of the assessment for elder abuse, as could having a private meeting with the daughter. But accepting the client's explanation is not correct because the social worker can see the client's explanation is not likely at this point. So again, some of those things could be part of that, but we're seeing bruising. It's sudden. Just looking at the walker and making a decision based on that wouldn't be sufficient. So they always want sort of that general thing. You see a change, you put it together with the behavior of the daughter, and you're saying, okay, we need to do an assessment and see if something bigger is going on here. All right, an older couple with no children comes to talk with a social worker in a local family service agency and works through many different issues during their treatment. They then begin to refer different other older couples who have no children to the social worker. The social worker enjoys doing couples work but does not want to fill her schedule with only couples. The social worker would also like to work with families. Since there are such a large number of couples being referred to the social worker, it is very difficult for her to continue working with families. In this instance, the social worker needs to refer couples to other social workers, examine her issues regarding couples, work with whoever contacts her, or talk with her supervisor on how to handle the situation. What do you think? Correct answer is D. Talk with the supervisor about how to handle the situation. When confronted with an issue of this type in an agency sitting, it's typically a good idea to confer with one's supervisor. Following consultation with the supervisor, the social worker may decide to refer couples to other social workers. Examining her issues regarding couples is not the best answer because there is no information in this question to indicate that the social worker has an issue with working with couples. She may simply want to expand her experience by working with different kinds of clients, including families. Working with whoever contacts her is not the best answer because the social worker can decide with whom she wants to work depending on the policies of the agency. Test tip. In this question, the information that this was an older couple was put in as a distractor. Age has nothing to do with the question. In the licensing exam, distractors such as this may be included in questions to elicit an emotional response from the test taker or to confuse the real intent of the question. So this isn't something where you would need to call adult protection or anything. It's like talk with your supervisor to sort it out. Question 88. And these are all actual exam questions. So While working with a 16-year-old girl in individual therapy, the mother, who is not the custodial parent, calls the social worker on the phone and wants a report on her daughter's depression. In this situation, the social worker should. All right. Again, here, huge clues in the questions. What are the huge clues in the question?
The client is a minor.
And, yep, and
The mother is not the custodial parent.
correct. So, what do you think is the correct answer? What do you want to eliminate?
Definitely eliminate B. We can't just give out that information.
Right? What else?
I also think eliminate C, calling the father to deal with the mother, as he has custodial rights would be eliminated.
Okay. And what else? What do you think is what do you need to do as a social worker here? What should you do?
I think, our responsibility is to the client. So for that reason, I would hesitate to do D because what if the daughter doesn't want to talk to the mother? So I may actually say A, but in a gentler way.
All right, let's see what we have here. The best answer is D, encourage the mother to talk with the daughter. This is the most sensitive way to deal with the issue. In addition, this response has the potential to strengthen the mother-daughter relationship. Although informing the mother that she has no right to that information is technically correct, as the social worker cannot share information without permission from the custodial parent, the better answer is to encourage the mother to talk with her daughter. Sharing with the mother what is happening with the daughter is not correct because the social worker cannot share it with the non-custodial. Calling the father is not correct because it would be better if the social worker suggested to the mother that she discuss the matter with the father rather than the social worker contacting the father. So, again, I think here it is good because what you're doing is encouraging the mother to develop a relationship with the daughter, which is fine, even though she's not the custodial parent. And you might end up informing her that you can't give that information, but the best answer is to encourage her to talk with the daughter and have the daughter share that information. A social worker is treating a client for test anxiety. The client comes in to see the social worker shortly after taking an algebra examination. When the social worker asks her how the test went, the client responds, awful. I just can't do anything right. According to Beck, this is an example of which common thinking error. So, what are we looking at here? And what are some clues in here that are helpful in the sentence, in the question? What do we want to look at for sure?
Quotations.
Yep. Quotations, awful. I just can't do anything right. So if you were just going to look at that and you didn't know who Beck was and who Beck's theory was, or Beck's theory is, what would you say? Which answer do you think corresponds to awful? I just can't do anything right. Personalization, catastrophizing, mind reading, or minimization? What do you think? Can someone hazard a guess?
Most of us are saying B in the response.
Oh, are you? Okay, sorry, I didn't go back. Yes, catastrophizing. The correct answer is catastrophizing. It's assuming the worst or overemphasizing the negative. The client is engaging in catastrophizing when she states that she cannot do anything right. And I probably don't need to read the rest of those things because it all has to do with Beck's theory, but catastrophizing, that was a great example of how what was in quotations allowed us to arrive at the answer without really maybe knowing Beck. A social worker in private practice has been working with a male client who's a successful businessman in his community. The client is not making progress in therapy, and he has a habit of blaming others for his relationship problems with his family. A method of helping this client become more self-aware by bringing light to components of his thoughts, feelings, or behaviors of which he is unaware is called summarizing, confrontation, active listening, or reflective listening. So again, what is a part of the question that is going to help us arrive at the answer? Laugh. I'm going to come over and see what you all are saying, even though I just snuck it in there. Okay. I revealed it. Yes. The correct answer is confrontation. Summarizing is not correct because summarizing is a verbal following skill which provides the client with a condensed version of a segment of an interview. Active listening is not correct because it's a set of skill used in problem resolution, wherein the listener rephrases the message. Reflective listening is not correct because that's another term for active listening. So good work. A 60-year-old woman has recently been hospitalized with a delusional disorder. She is convinced that her neighbor is able to access her thoughts through the telephone lines. Which of the following approaches should the social worker not take in dealing with this individual's delusion? Emphasize how vulnerable she must be feeling, acknowledge how difficult it must be to be hospitalized, acknowledge how real the delusion feels to the client, confront the client with the unreasonableness of the delusion. So which one should the social worker not take? Correct answer is D, confront the client with the unreasonableness of the delusion. When dealing with delusional clients, the social worker should not try to reality test them. Instead, the social worker should deal with them in a calm, empathic manner. All of the other answers listed are appropriate approaches to take with the client. A social worker is interested in conducting a study of drug use among adults of different ethnic backgrounds. Which of the following sampling strategies is most apt to yield a sample that reflects the ethnic composition of the area? This is a straight recall question from research, and there will be a few of those. So is it simple random sampling, convenient sampling, snowball sampling, or stratified sampling? Drop your answer in there, and I'm going to reveal the answer. I would review those. I would review terms like validity and reliability and sort of these sampling methods because you'll probably get a question about one of those. The correct answer is D, stratified sampling. This form of sampling is used to ensure that there are sufficient cases representing different values of a variable, in this case, ethnic group. Simple random sampling is not correct because simple random sampling refers to the random selection of a predetermined number of cases from a sampling frame, where each case in the sampling frame has an equal probability of being selected for inclusion. Convenient sampling doesn't work because that refers to cases that are selected for inclusion because they can be readily accessed. And snowball sampling is not correct because snowball sampling is a sampling strategy that involves compiling the sample as the study progresses. A client who's 16 years old lost his leg in a serious automobile accident 4 years ago. Before the accident, the client had excelled in sports. Since the accident, he has devoted himself to developing computer proficiency. A psychoanalytically oriented social worker would account for this client's post-accident obsession with computers as conversion, denial, compensation, or reaction formation. So again, this is something that is sort of recall. The answer is compensation, which refers to seeking success in one area of life as a substitute for success in another area of life. All right. Rolinda is a 27-year-old female who was referred to a social worker for issues regarding depression and anxiety. As the social worker interviewed Rolinda, the client reported that when she feels depressed and anxious, that she finds herself eating more than I should. Rolinda eats when she is not hungry, and once she starts eating, she is unable to stop until she does feel uncomfortably full. She is doing this on average twice a week for the past 6 months. Rolinda feels guilty and disgusted with herself. She appears to be overweight, but she's not obese. The best diagnosis that describes Rolinda's behavior is bulimia nervosa, overeating disorder, binge eating disorder, or major depressive disorder. And the correct answer is C, binge eating disorder. She meets the criteria for feeling out of control, feeling uncomfortably full, and feeling guilty or embarrassed. People with binge eating disorder are not necessarily obese. A is not correct. Although she binges, she does not have compensatory behaviors. B is not correct, and there's no DSM-5 treatment diagnosis for overeating disorder. Major depressive disorder is also not correct. This is a good example where you could say, well, maybe she's super depressed, and choose that as the answer, and that's why she's eating. But there wasn't really anything indicative of that from a diagnostic perspective. Which of the following best differentiates between autistic disorder and disintegrative disorder? Impairment in expressive language, impairment in social skills, impairment in interpersonal skills, and the loss of previously acquired skills. I'm going to guess this question could appear on an LGSW exam. It wouldn't appear on an LSW exam, and most likely wouldn't appear until an LICSW exam. However, there are some diagnostic questions on the exam, and sometimes some questions about medication. So the correct answer is D, the loss of previously acquired skills. Impairment in expressive language, social skills, and interpersonal relationships are characteristic of both disorders. Only childhood disintegrative disorders characterized by normal development initially, with later loss of previously acquired skills. All right, a couple more, and then we're going to jump to the exams that I'm going to give you so that you can take them and see how you do. A 5-year-old male has been in 4 different foster homes over his lifetime. His current foster parents are concerned about his seeming inability to form relationships with people. He responds to the efforts of others to engage him, including his foster parents, with hostility. Which one of the following would be the most appropriate diagnosis for the child? So 5-year-old in 4 different foster homes, not being able to form relationships. Conduct disorder. Is there anything in there that would make us think that? Reactive attachment disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, or separation anxiety disorder. So I think there's 2 you could throw out, and 1 for sure, but 1 where you'd be like, maybe. But 1 pretty obvious answer in there, which is the reactive attachment disorder. Again, this is for those of you who are doing LGSW and can think about diagnostic kinds of indicators. But this diagnosis is characterized by markedly disturbed and developmentally inappropriate social relatedness before age 5, frequently resulting from repeated changes of primary caretakers. So I think even if you haven't had the diagnostic class, you could kind of get from that question a 5-year-old male who's been in 4 different foster homes and can't form relationships, that it's reactive detachment disorder. Okay, we actually are making it here to the next questions. I think we lost a few people in here, 3, 6, 9, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna, these are available to you. There's 2 of them. You can scan both of them and then take them and you'll get your results. I think there's a place in there to also put your name on there. But I think there's 30 questions in each of them, 25 or 30 in each of them. So it'll give you a chance to work through questions. Some of the ones that we went through together tonight had some of those indicators and some of them didn't. But I encourage you to think about all the things that we talked through tonight and those clues and use those as you process through taking these test exams that we have here put together for you. I really do think that, again, reviewing some of the theories of those developmental theories, you'll get those. I think that if you want to take, especially for those of you who are taking LGSW, I think it's helpful to I had found one. I haven't been able to find it recently. I didn't have as much time to look today, but there's a couple of really cool cheat guides out there with medications that can help you understand what they're used for generally. And I would suggest doing that if you're taking the LG and you're not very familiar with generic like medications for general depression or bipolar or those kinds of things, anxiety. I would maybe take a look at those. And then I would, again, as I have said, make sure that you read through all of especially the behaviors in the 9 competencies, because you do really want to think about the sequencing of how we work with clients. Are there questions? I'm going to get over to that screen.
I have a question, like where I saw something pop up where it says scan me. Is
Yes.
were we supposed to scan that? I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, I'm going to share that with you right now. I just kind of wanted to come and see your
Oh,
face before I put that on there, because that's kind of the end of the prep, is that you have those exams and that you take them, and hopefully they're helpful to have practices. And then I wrote everybody's name down, and I'm going to make sure that I email you. I'm just going to cut and paste all those links to the different like websites and different tools that you can get. So I'm sharing this now. There's 2, practice quiz 1, practice quiz 2, scan those. And then hopefully those will be helpful to you. Be prepared, be well rested, use the things we talked about tonight when you get stuck on something. And I'm sure everybody will do just amazingly well. I believe in you. And it's such a huge accomplishment when you pass that exam. So thank you for coming tonight and for being with me. I wanted to say that I was hoping to spend a little bit more time with some of the questions we were going to do tonight, but when my mother broke her leg a week ago and we had to travel out here, I didn't have as much time to work on those questions today. But hopefully this was helpful to you. Feel free to reach out, and I really believe that you will all do well. So I'll stick around for a few minutes, but other than that, thank you so much for joining, and bless you all, and peace and all of those good things. And I'll look forward to seeing you at graduation.
thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.